I'm here to demonstrate to you why IBM is guilty of genocide and consciously helping to co-plan and co-organize the destruction and murder of millions of people consciously for money. And I brought the documents with me, some of them. And this book, IBM and the Holocaust, and there's a website for it, IBMandtheholocaust.com, and my own website, edwinblack.com. Came out 10 years ago, and IBM can't deny it. And the reason they can't deny it is because they know that they consciously engaged in genocide, micromanaged by Thomas J. Watson personally. And so, tomorrow morning, the management of the Endicott Visitor Center will not get a letter of complaint from the IBM legal team. They will get silence. But you will have the benefit of seeing the actual documents, and you'll be able to ask me any questions. So I'm going to explain to you exactly how it happened. When Hitler came to power in January of 1933, January 30th of 1933, his goal was to destroy all the Jews, not only in Germany, but throughout Europe. And this required the resources of a computer. But in 1933, there was no such thing as a computer as we know it today. There was instead the Hollerith punch card system, which stored information on any person, any action, any quantity, any process in the holes that were punched into rows and columns. Those were then subjected to a magnetic reader, and the information could be not counted, but cross-tabulated. IBM owned information technology. They had a monopoly on it. Even the 10% of American information technology that was given to Remington Rand was an expensive license to pretend that they did not have 100% of the market. So when Hitler came to power, he wanted to destroy the Jews. He wanted to murder them. He wanted to evict them, pauperize them. The only company on earth that could have orchestrated that, organized it, planned it, IBM, under the personal supervision of Thomas J. Watson, did so. They organized custom-made programs to automate all 6 phases of the Holocaust. The identification of the Jews, their expulsion from society, the confiscation of their assets, the ghettoization, the deportation, even the extermination of the Jews. How did they do it? Well, first Hitler said, we want to know where the Jews are. Some of the Jews were in synagogues. Some of them did not even know they were Jewish because their grandparents had converted to Christianity. They were actually worshiping in churches, in Catholic cathedrals. Some of them were recognizable because they wore traditional religious headgear. Others looked like ordinary businessmen. How do we find out where the Jews are? IBM, the solutions company, said, we have the solution. And indeed, there was no solution that IBM was not willing to give to the Nazis. IBM invented the racial census for the Nazis. Here we need to understand that the information age that you all are aware of, did not begin in Silicon Valley. It began in Berlin in 1933. And when I say the information age, I specifically mean the individualization of statistics. That is the information age. So IBM devised a racial census where they would punch in one column the religion, in a second column the mother tongue, in the third column the nationality, in the fourth column the profession, and the fifth column the residence. Then at the rate of 24,000 cards per hour, like that, the Nazis know all the Jews of Polish extraction in Berlin engaged in the fur trade. Once Hitler said, we don't have the resources to undertake such a census, IBM said, and Watson specifically directed them to say, we will do it for you. We'll hire the people, we'll do the tabulation, we'll rent the facilities. Once the names were known, they were cross-tabulated against lists. The professors, the directory of professors, the directory of judges, the directory of doctors, the motor club, the gardening club, the phone book. And they could find out who were the Jewish judges, who were the Jewish doctors, who were the Jewish bankers, expel them. And then came the third phase, confiscation, get their assets. All the banks and financial institutions in Nazi Germany ran on Hollerith punch cards. Now we know their name. We've thrown them out of their job. We've made it impossible for them to work. And now we're going to seize their bank accounts. We're going to seize their insurance. We're going to seize their property. We're going to Aryanize their assets. The fourth phase was ghettoization. IBM and its Hollerith punch card system was a master at moving people, tracking people, quantifying people. One day, everybody gets up, thrown out of their house. They know exactly where to go. They're sent over into ghettos, 5, 6, 7, 8 families into one cramped apartment like that. Efficient. Not only in one city, but in many cities, not only in one country, but in several countries around Europe. Deportation. The Jews sent on trains, like my mom was sent on a train. All the trains in Europe ran on IBM punch cards. I personally interviewed the Polish man who worked for the IBM process at 22 Pavierstrasse in Krakow, organizing the trains. They went to Auschwitz full, they came back empty. They went to Auschwitz full, they came back empty. They even organized the extermination of the Jews by creating and masterminding the extermination by labor campaign, where they would catalog all your skills. Are you a doctor? Are you a bricklayer? Are you a metal worker? Once they had your skills, they would cross-tabulate that against where they needed slave labor. They would move people across the country on special trucks and trains, on Hollerith lists. They would work them to death, and after they were worked to death, they would then have them gassed, and IBM had a code for that too. In fact, the Auschwitz tattoo began as an IBM number. It quickly transmogrified into something different, but it began as an IBM number. That was the prisoner number. There was, in fact, an IBM customer site in virtually every concentration camp. What was the name of that customer site? It was called the Hollerith Abteilung, the Hollerith Department. Where was it located? It was located in the Arbeitseinsatz, which means the labor assignment office. Specifically, where was it located? In Stutthof, it was by the cafeteria. In Dachau, it was in the Hollerith bunker, directly across from the main gate. In Sachsenhausen, it was in the T building, right off the path when you first enter the premises. In Mauthausen, it was across from the parade plots. In Auschwitz, they said you'll never find IBM in Auschwitz. I found them. I checked the Auschwitz phone book. And they were listed with their phone number and the name of the personnel. I went to the site. They were located directly across from the IG Farben plant in Auschwitz II. Always knew when the IBM machines were coming in, because they always had to bring in the transformers to convert the electricity. And these machines, they had to be serviced every 2 weeks. Had to have a light service every 2 weeks and a major service every 4 weeks. And that was done on site, whether it was at the Ministry of the Foreign Ministry in Berlin, or on site in the concentration camp, Dachau, Auschwitz, Buchenwald. If they only would have stopped printing the cards, millions and millions and millions of cards, it would be like having rifles without bullets. But IBM would not stop printing the cards, even as the ovens were burning. In fact, they actually sued another printer in Berlin in the 40s for copyright infringement, patent infringement, for trying to print Hollerith punch cards to run on their machines. No wonder Thomas Watson received a medal from Adolf Hitler in Berlin in 1937 in the biggest banquet that the city had ever seen. And of course, Thomas Watson personally received a 1% commission on all this Nazi commerce. And you've heard of the 1%ers, the people who had quotas. All these companies, all these subsidiaries, licensees, bureaus, all had quotas to sell to the Nazis. And all the money, right after the war, bank account after bank account, secret bank account after secret bank account. Many of them, there wasn't even paperwork for them. It was in somebody else's name. All the money and all the profits were gathered up. If you ask IBM, what did you do? What's the answer? Do you deny this? They will lie to you. They will say, we have no information on the period. That's false. There's copies of IBM and the Holocaust right there. There's about 1,500 footnotes of primary documents taken mainly from their own files at Sindelfingen in Germany and in various parts in New York City, in New York State. And there are many more in Brazil. There's many more in Kingston, New York. There's documents in France, documents in Poland. So now, let's see some of those documents, some of the 20,000 documents. You don't come to Endicott and accuse IBM of mass murder without documents. Okay. Now, IBM at all times knew what was happening in Nazi Germany. The whole world knew what was happening in Nazi Germany. For heaven's sakes, a little girl hiding in an attic in Amsterdam knew that she wrote in her diary, the Nazis are gassing Jews in Poland. I heard it on the BBC. Here's a letter, a 1939 letter. I'm restricted by this. Anyone here read German? Read German? Good. I'm restricted by this. This is a letter from Deutsche Hollerith Maschinengesellschaft. That's the German Hollerith Machine Company. And what is the date on that letter?
September 9, 1959.
19 what?
1959?
39.
39.
All right. This is just before the outbreak of World War II. This is when the alphabetizing machines were given to Nazi Germany. And Watson wanted it all to be verbal, no letters, no documents. So it was all done in telephone communications. But his Nazi collaborators didn't trust him for the commission, so they took notes. And these are their notes. Now, do you see who is this letter written to?
Thomas Watson.
What's the date?
September 9th, 1939.
What's the address for Thomas Watson?
International Business Machines, 590 Madison Avenue, New York.
And this letter says, thank you for giving us these alphabetizers, which you originally didn't want to give us because you thought it was going to invade the IBM subsidiary in Poland. And here we have, what does that say?
Yesterday morning, Mr. Schott telephoned once more and informed me, obviously pleased, that he had again spoken with America, namely with Mr. Watson and Mr. Oxbury. It had them developed that America had been under a mistaken impression. It had been believed that we were yet to be supplied with machines. After this had been cleared up, agreement had been expressed to our keeping the machines I had asked for until further notice on the basis of my proposition.
Here's the receipt for the machines, here's the serial numbers. And here's the New York Times from September 13th, front page. Nazis hint purge of Jews in Poland. How many Jews?
3 million.
And it says here, how can the removal of Jews from Poland without their extermination? No one can explain. In fact, IBM moved the machines across Europe in cadence with the Nazi conquest of the continent. They moved into Poland right after the Blitzkrieg, set up Watson Business Machine subsidiary to organize the rape of Poland. They moved into Holland just before the Nazis to organize the plunder and oppression of the Dutch people. World War I started in 1939, September 30th, 6 a.m. What's the date of this letter?
10th of October, 1941.
And who is it written to?
Mr. H.K. Chauncey, Office of the Secretary-Treasurer, International Business Machines Corporation.
What's the address?
590 Madison Avenue, New York.
In this letter, it says, our machines blocked in Poland. I got them unblocked and moved into Romania in time for the Romanian census. And here's one the day before. Excuse me, dear. What's the date of this letter?
First one,
Yeah.
9th of October, 1941,
What's the letterhead?
IBM Corporation.
Who's the letter to?
Thomas J. Watson.
Written from Berlin as the other one. And it says, on my occasion of my visit to Berlin, I settled the machines blocked in Poland. I handled the Romanian census. And I also took care of the lawsuit against those who are trying to print these cards in Paris. They kept on top of this stuff. Concentration camp. Can you join me here? Step up. This is just a piece of paper. There's no punch card. There's no automation shown. But there are codes on this piece of paper that were punched in. Now that says, in fact, you read German, right? What does that word say?
I don't know what Häftling is.
Prisoner.
Prisoner?
These were all the prisoner cards. Every prisoner had a number, an IBM number. The number had to be coordinated with what the machines could take. That number eventually became a tattoo. So, once more. This guy was arrested. His number is 076390, right?
Okay, there it is.
And he was arrested by Kripo. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
And what's the code for Kripo?
02?
And he was sent to Dachau.
Yes.
And what's the code for Dachau?
03?
Correct. Now here's the secret IBM code list taken by the Third Army for the concentration camps. Step up here again. What is the code for Gestapo?
01?
And what is the code for Kripo?
02?
And Auschwitz is what number?
001?
And Buchenwald is what number?
002?
And what number is Dachau?
003?
Same as this. Now, here's a list of all the types of prisoners that IBM had categorized for the Nazis. Code 2, Jehovah's Witness. Code 3, homosexual. Code 12, gypsy. Code 8, Juden, Jew. What's the status of these prisoners in these concentration camps? Code 1, entlassen. It means released. Code 2, Überstellung. It means transferred. Code 3, gestorben. It means the dead of natural causes. Code 4, executed. Code 5, Freitod. It means suicide. And code 6, see it there? Sonderbehandlung. Special handling, gas chamber. That meant that IBM engineers had to devise a special methodology by which they could discriminate whether a Jew was worked to death, executed by hanging, or sent into a gas chamber. They had to print up the cards, they had to rig the machines, they had to train the personnel. And this is why IBM is silent. Buchenwald. Handwritten lists. How do we know there were Hollerith machines there? Hollerith process, some had machines, some had cards, some just had sorting procedures. This is the Hollerith Commando. All of these names and all of their prisoner numbers. Anyone can come up and look at this. They had so many, they had so many Hollerith cards in Buchenwald, they eventually cut them in half and used them for scrap paper. Here are some of the scraps. Here are the names of all the people on all the days who were working in the Hollerith department. IBM had to make a mock-up for every punch card. There was no universal punch card. There was 10 rows, there was 20, there was double 40. They made a mock-up in pencil, as you can see, with all the traits and characteristics that they wanted. And then when that was approved and modified, they would print up the punch cards. The punch cards were by and large the same size as a dollar bill. They were done under clinical conditions, and only IBM could print them. And here you see Rassenamt for the SS, one of the many, many special cards that IBM was printing. And always on the side, you see the IBM trademark, Deutsche Hollerith Maschine Gesellschaft. So everybody would know this was an IBM product. Now these are ordinary pieces of paper. They're death lists from Mauthausen. Anyone would look at them and say they're just typed lists. But at the bottom of each list, or sometimes in the middle, you see a stamp. And the stamp says Hollerith erfasst, processed by Hollerith machine. When I went to Auschwitz, they said, we have thousands of documents. They're all marked Hollerith erfasst. We have no idea what they mean. Ravensbrück and Flossenburg says here in one of these documents, we are moving in 2,324 prisoners, each with a Hollerith card, and all their names are on the Hollerith list. And we're distributing them to these 6 sub-concentration camps in exactly this particular quantity. Let me show you there. See, they're giving 887 to Zwadau, 159 to Graslitz. And then they found 8 women, not 8,000, 8 women, and they have their names. They said, these women have escaped. And if these 8 women are not found quickly, we will delete them from the Hollerith databases that we are assembling, so you won't be able to count on them for being available for work. What was one of the means by which I was able to track IBM presence in a concentration camp? In small ways. Here are vaccination records. They had one for kitchen detail, they had one for various groups that serviced the camp, one for Hollerith. Do you see this there? What does that say?
Hollerith.
Stutthof. Who can read German? What does that big word with a V mean? Vertrag. What does it mean? Contract. It's a contract. What is the date of this contract?
1st of July, 1942.
Who is the contract with?
International Business Machines,
What city?
New York.
This is with the Maschinenbauwesen, the Reich ministers the German armament ministry. There was one for every machine, and every machine was insured. And they had to know where those machines were in order to insure them. And all the money was recovered after the war because IBM hid the money, often using front men. One of those front men or facilitators was the head of the Prague division, who doubled as in the German section, and his name was Schneider. What's the date of this letter?
The 4th of July, 1945.
Who's the letter to?
Thomas Watson,
Where?
New York.
It says, hope this finds you well. You may check me here, dear. Just want you to know that all the interests of IBM were in good hands. The dollar rentals were transferred to the account of the IBM in Geneva. After the beginning of the war with the United States, all the dollar rentals were converted by exchange rate of 25 crowns to the dollar, and then stored in a blocked account of IBM in Prague. And he further states that he met with Chauncey, Watson's personal assistant, in Berlin in 1942 and made an arrangement to take German machines and re-tag them as Czech machines, so no one would know that they were actually Nazi machines and thought that they were occupied, and to hide the source of those machines. Now, why did IBM do this? That's right. That's right. Business was their middle name. It was never about the Nazism. Never about anti-Semitism. It was always about the money. He didn't hate the Polish people when he set up a Polish subsidiary to organize the rape of Poland in a subsidiary named Watson Business Machines. He didn't hate the Dutch when he set up a special subsidiary just before the Nazis came in to organize the plunder and oppression of Holland. He didn't hate the people of New York City when Hollerith punch cards were used to organize the V rockets that were due to crash into lower Manhattan if they had ever been completed. What's the message? No matter how big the company is, no matter how cultic it is, no matter how powerful their economic resources, no matter how vital and dazzling is their technology, never again should we allow such resources, such American corporate muscle to afflict innocent civilians. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. And now I will take any question from anyone. The question was consorting with the enemy. Of course they were consorting with the enemy. At some point, the FBI actually investigated Watson for un-American activities. IBM was essential to the American war effort. They were actually doing the weather for the Normandy crossing. They were also doing the weather for the Nazis. They were playing both sides against the middle. Everyone knew it. FDR knew it. The Nazis knew it. And no one could afford to turn off their Hollerith machines as much as anyone could afford to turn off their computers today. IBM was not brought to justice during the Holocaust. They were not brought to justice after the Holocaust, and they will not be brought to justice today. But many have tried. The question is this not just capitalism?
Not just capitalism.
Is this not actually capitalism at play?
Okay.
It's not in my index. I don't think socialism or communism is in my index either. But I will say this. You want to see a capitalist? I'm a capitalist. Capone was not a capitalist, but he had many businesses. He made lots of money. A company that engages in theft, in genocide, violates international law, and is told by an international embodiment of countries that the Nazis will answer to the bar of justice and all those who collaborated will go with, that is not capitalism. Slave labor is not capitalism.
Now, I'd be careful with that because there's different definitions of capitalism. And for you just to say that is not true.
Well, I assure you that well, put it this way. The capitalism that I want is making a good dollar for honest activity. It's not criminal enterprise. It's not murder incorporated. It's not slave labor. It isn't by any measure of the Allies who defeated the Nazis, by any measure, a genuine commercial activity. They specifically had rules to roll up all the commercial ventures that the Nazis engaged in. For heaven's sakes, the Nazis Aryanized companies. They stole companies. They committed theft of banks. They had slave labor. They worked people to death. That was not capitalism. That was National Socialism. Would a company be allowed to do that today? There have recently been congressional hearings on the fact that Yahoo and Microsoft and I believe Google have been engaging in suppression activities, facilitating with China. And I believe it was the representative from New Jersey, Chris Smith, who said, aren't you doing the same thing that IBM did in Nazi Germany? Any enterprise which is designed to afflict innocent civilians is not capitalism. But is it going on today? Yes, it's going on today. Siemens Nokia, or Nokia Siemens, just provided the people tracking technology to Iran to enable it to crack down on the voter revolution, to stop it, and to undertake heinous torture and murder of its own citizens. Remember, this was custom-made technology. This was not a typewriter that you sold and then you walked away from. This depended on IBM every minute of the day. They never sold the equipment, they only leased it. After IBM entered the war, you mean after Pearl Harbor?
Yes, after the United States.
Pearl Harbor, I forgot to mention, the Japanese aircraft industry were also organized on IBM systems just before Pearl Harbor was bombed. They did it through neutrals, Vichy France, Sweden, Portugal, Switzerland. They backdated documents, they forged documents, they acted as though they had undertaken certain contracts before Pearl Harbor. They did everything they could to push the envelope to allow them to continue selling. And of course, it was all organized through the Paris and Geneva offices of IBM once the war had started, because it was illegal to communicate directly through New York, even though we see that the personal attorney for Mr. Watson was in Berlin in 1942 organizing this subterfuge. 1942. In fact, the last royalty payment or monthly rental was given by an IBM official in Berlin in 1945 to a lieutenant in occupied Berlin who said, please give this final check to Mr. Watson. Didn't Watson have a conscience?
He ever showed any remorse for any of this?
He never showed remorse. and he was able to buy his way into history. If in a few minutes I'll be speaking at Binghamton SUNY, and there's a Watson Research Institute there, and I'm sure there's many, many more. All of the biggest, it's one of the oldest texts in the book that the biggest transgressors can put their name on the most noble of endeavors. When people objected to working with the Nazis or with any customer, Watson would say, quote, if you can't agree with what your customer is doing, find something you can agree on. And what they could agree on was the money. AGFA. AGFA.
Yeah. What was the relationship between?
It was a Nazi operation.
Yes.
It was taken over by the United States government, and through a series of corporate transitions. I think they're now known as BNF or BNCF or something of that nature. AGFA was engaged in emulsions, and emulsions were very important. They were a Nazi enterprise, and they were seized and shut down. There's an index where AGFA is mentioned. Yes.
Were you thinking of BASF?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, that was General Aniline, I believe, was involved with that. Actually, General Aniline, BASF. So that was not AGFA. But AGFA was one of the many German companies that was doing work here, often through subsidiaries, and the American government was shutting them down as fast as they could, if they could. But when a lowly government investigator goes into IBM and starts to investigate Thomas Watson, who's being mentioned as a presidential candidate, who's in direct communication at any given time with FDR, it's not easy. Well, here's how I got the documents. IBM, of course, had access to the book before it came out, as did about 1,000 people in one way or another, including about 100 major historians. They had they had originally agreed, rather, to let me in to see their documents, and then they refused, and they wouldn't explain why they refused. They started getting letters from major historians, publications, and Jewish leaders, and finally, they overnighted 6 boxes of critical documents to New York University for study, which would keep them out of my ability to get them since I was not a student there. Who did they send them to? A Dead Sea Scrolls scholar. That's called parking the documents. The document, he's actually the #1 Dead Sea Scrolls scholar, and there were 6 boxes in his closet. He had no idea what they were. They were unprocessed documents. I came in one day at lunch. I copied them all. I got them. And now everyone can see them. They're all referenced. They're identified. And all of my 99.99% of everything I have is not based on eyewitness testimony or oral tradition, but on replicable documents. This book, there's 1 million copies in print, in 14 languages, in 60 countries, and IBM has consistently refused, day after day, lecture after lecture, documentary after documentary, to respond or deny these charges. The repairmen were local repairmen who were under the control of IBM. They had been trained by IBM. They could only use the IBM equipment, the IBM punch cards. I remember the Polish guy who was working with these machines. I said to him, did a technician come out to service the machines every 2 weeks? He says, yes. I said, what was the name of his company? And he didn't say International Business Machines, which would have been easy. He says, Watson Business Machines, which was the name of the Polish subsidiary. Your uncle, here's a little, you told me some full disclosure that your uncle was involved in the potential. Here's some full disclosure from me. I use IBM computers. They're deadly accurate. That's how I wrote the book. Okay, what prodded my interest in the first place? The Hollerith Company was, it was no Hollerith Company per se, but there was the Hollerith machine, which was developed by Herman Hollerith. And this company became, through a series of mergers and acquisitions, what we now know as the international business machine. Kind of in the way it's today, people say that the PC is like an IBM PC compatible. The word Hollerith was interchangeable with the word IBM, with the name of IBM, in the same way that Bell is interchangeable with the phone company. Now you want to know what got...
Hollerith
was the technology. The man Hollerith was long dead.
preceded IBM's.
No, Hollerith became the company that renamed itself in 1928 International Business Machines. Now, let's talk about how I got interested in this. My mom escaped from a train in a small grate on the way to Treblinka. My father walked away from a shooting place in Poland. My mom was buried in a mass grave. They lived for 2 years in the woods, almost in the fashion that they did in the movie Defiance. I took my mom and dad to the opening of the U.S. Holocaust Museum. And there, the first thing you saw when you walked in was an IBM machine. First thing. And I said to the people there, what was this IBM machine used for? They said, we don't know. We just know that we were told to acquire this by some survivors, et cetera, et cetera. My parents said to me, what does IBM have to do with Holocaust? I said, I will find out. And I did. Where are the original documents? They're in my basement. They're in my basement.
But you said you made copies.
Oh, the original.
Yes, exactly.
Well, it just depends. I used about 30 or 40 different archives around the world. Some of the IBM documents themselves are sitting in New York University. There's also the National Archives. There's the Public Record Office. Each concentration camp has its own little archive and library. And so if you open up, it's common for people to open the book up, my book, to any page and point. And I have all the files by chapter and footnote number available on a 30-second basis. And that is why his uncle, father, never went through with the libel suit against me, because truth is still a defense for libel. And whenever I talk about this topic, I've got my documents, I've got the book. There's been a cottage industry trying to find fault with this book, even if I misspelled a word. And they actually said, we found an error in your book. In one place you referred to Holland as the Netherlands in a translation. There was a movie about the corporation which did an extended section on IBM and the Holocaust. The guy in that movie doing that section was me. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.